Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is warning of what he calls a severe response to a rocket strike that killed 12 young people in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights on Saturday. Netanyahu visited the site of the deadly attack in the Druze Arab village of Majd al-Shams today. Israel blames the Iran-backed Lebanese militant group Hezbollah for the strike on the sports field, which killed teenagers and children. The Israeli Security Cabinet has authorized Netanyahu and his defense minister to decide how and when to respond. Some residents of the village came out to protest against Netanyahu's visit, accusing him of exploiting their tragedy for political purposes. The rocket strike has renewed fears of an all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah. In a moment, I'll be talking to a former head of Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad, to gauge how likely an open conflict is. But first, a look at the military capabilities both sides could draw up.
Hezbollah rockets fired from southern Lebanon, intercepted by Israeli air defenses, a common occurrence in recent weeks. But some of those rockets make it through, and Israel has retaliated with devastating airstrikes. Hezbollah was founded as an anti-American and anti-Israel militia in the 1980s when it carried out deadly car bombings on American forces in Lebanon. The group has fought several wars with Israel since then and has become a major political force, backed by hundreds of millions of dollars in funding from Iran. The militia prizes secrecy and typically doesn't reveal information on its capabilities, so any estimates of its forces are just that. But in recent years, U.S. intelligence has put its strength at 45,000 soldiers, including full-time and reservist fighters. The group's leader referred to having 100,000 fighters in 2021. If that were true, it would have more soldiers than the Lebanese army. Last year, the U.S. estimated that Hezbollah also has 150,000 rockets and missiles, more than enough to overwhelm Israeli air defenses and cause significant damage to infrastructure in a war. Israel has one of the world's most modern militaries. In addition to 170,000 active-duty soldiers, there are about 465,000 reservists. It also has about 1,400 tanks, as well as significant artillery and multiple rocket launching capabilities. It also has an air force with over 200 jet fighters and almost 150 helicopters. And it's widely considered to have nuclear weapons, though it's unlikely to use them right across its own border. There's also the Iron Dome, an advanced anti-missile system that has intercepted thousands of rockets from Hezbollah and Hamas, something Hezbollah itself lacks. An all-out war would likely cause significant damage to Israeli and Lebanese cities with high civilian casualties. After months of fighting Hamas in Gaza, Israel's army is also in danger of being overstretched. And there are worries that intense fighting could bring in Iran and the U.S. in a major regional conflict.
Efraim Halevy is the former director of Israel's intelligence agency Mossad, and he joins me now from Tel Aviv. Mr. Halevy, welcome to DW. I want to start with the question everybody is asking today. How close are Israel and Hezbollah to an all-out war?
I think we will know once Israel will take action as it has stated that it would be. A lot will depend on the scope of the step we are taking, which is on the one hand to be a very firm one and a clear one, and on the other hand to allow the other side not to respond necessarily.
You have been involved in this kind of decision-making in the past. What would be your advice to Prime Minister Netanyahu in terms of responding to this attack now that the ball is very much in Israel's court?
I think it is impossible for Israel to refrain from responding to the attack. It was an attack which one cannot ignore. And ignoring an attack like this would probably have a very, very bad effect on Israel's deterrent capabilities. And therefore, a response is absolutely essential. But it has to be a response which, on the one hand, as I said, is very clear and also probably painful up to a point, but also it allows the other side to refrain from retaliating in a manner which will bring the entire region into a regional war. This
That
is
is
not in the interest of it's not in the interest of Hezbollah today, and what is more important, I believe, it's not in the interest of Iran.
What would another full-fledged military operation mean for the war in Gaza? Because from what I've been gathering, it's also not very much in the interest of Israel, right, to have another war on their hands.
No, I don't think it's in our interest to have another war on our hands. But at the same time, we cannot accept a situation in which we have a large section of the country which is under fire almost daily, and where over 80,000 people have left their homes. We cannot live with this situation indefinitely.
And I want to bring up a detail that might not be so minor. What do you make of the fact that Hezbollah denies being involved in this?
Well, at first they did not respond. They were very silent. It took them a long time to take responsibility. I suppose that they also considered what was in their interest. But in any way, everybody understood that it was they who took this action. I'm not sure if they clearly were targeting this particular football center, because it's very possible that they had another target in mind, and that the target which they hit was not the target which they originally intended to hit in such an operation.
Hezbollah and Hamas, of course, are both backed by Iran, but throughout your time at Mossad, how did you experience the two groups to differ from each other? Now, Hezbollah's superior military might aside.
I think one has to remember that when it comes to Gaza, they are the sole element which makes decisions on what kind of action they should take. But in the case of Hezbollah, they are not alone. They have others that they have to take into account. They have to take into account the government of Lebanon. They have to take into account the government of Syria. And what is more important, they have to take into account Iran. Now, today, of all days, the new president of Iran has assumed the office of president after he won the election there. And it's clear that he is not intending to embroil the entire Middle East in war. His interests are totally opposed to this. And therefore, if there is an Iranian influence here, which is quite possible, this could be the first test in which the Iranians will step in and also have something to say as to what kind of retaliation or response the Hezbollah will take after Israel carries out the operation that it intends to carry out.
How do you expect Tehran to position itself in this? You say this is a war they do not want. It is a war Hezbollah doesn't want. It is a war that Israel doesn't want. Couldn't this be an off-ramp to diplomacy in the region?
I think that there is such a possibility. I think one has to be patient. I don't think this will be done overnight, but I think that we have now this new Iranian government, a new president, and a president who has a different policy on international affairs and who has an interest in opening up a dialogue of one kind or another with the United States. And I think this is a new, a very important factor which we will see possibly in play in this particular case as well. This is the first test there is of the influence that Iran can exert on the Hezbollah in a situation like this.
That was Israel's former spy chief, Efraim Halevy. Thank you so much for your fascinating insights and your time.
Thank you, and let's hope for the best.
Our correspondent Tania Krämer is following developments from Jerusalem, and I asked her what this severe response against Hezbollah that Netanyahu announced today might look like.
Yeah, that's also what's certainly being discussed here. It's somehow a very tense waiting time right now. And we've seen over the past days already Israel's Air Force carrying out strikes, sometimes deep inside Lebanon or in southern Lebanon, and also counter-strikes from Hezbollah. Again, some air raid sirens went off in the north. But, now the focus is on not so much if there will be a response by Israel, but when this will happen, and also, on the scope and the targets of this response, because this will very much define, according to military experts here, what then will be Hezbollah's response to all of that. So there could be a strike, for example. Israel has threatened that many times, in Beirut, but there's some sources here saying that there's a lot of pressure now on Israel not to go overboard with this response. We just heard again Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today visiting the Druze town of Mashd al-Shams in the occupied Golan Heights. He was heckled there also by some people there, but he again vowed a very powerful response, and we heard that also from other politicians. While at the same time we're also hearing from the diplomatic sources there is a lot of efforts going on to call for restraint, also by all the mediators that have been trying to mediate between Hezbollah, Lebanon and Israel in the past month already. The U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein, but also France. There was a phone call with the French President Macron and Prime Minister Netanyahu on Sunday. And, everybody's trying to prevent this to become a wider regional war.
This is the latest escalation in a tit-for-tat that's been going on for months now. There have been almost daily clashes between Israel and Hezbollah since October 7th. What does that mean for the people living and working near the border area on both sides?
Well, yeah, if you're talking to people that come from northern Israel, they would tell you there is already a war going on. Some call it a war of attrition. Now, this has all started on October 8 after the attacks on October 7 and then the war in Gaza, because this is very much related to what is happening in Gaza. Hezbollah then started attacking Israel on a limited scope at times, but there were periods when it became more and less. And of course, Israel is also counter-attacking in Lebanon. There have been casualties on both sides of the border among civilians, but also Hezbollah militants and also among soldiers in Israel. So what has happened here in October last year is that over 60,000 people, and at times even more, were asked to evacuate the areas very close to the border, up to 5 kilometers from the border. And most of them are still not being able to go home. So there was a lot of pressure here on the government to change that situation, either through diplomatic means also or militarily. And there was always this fear that an incident like what we've seen on Saturday in Mashd al-Shams on the occupied Golan Heights, where a lot of civilians, in this case kids and teenagers, were killed, could trigger actually this military response and even a wider escalation here in the region.
That was DW correspondent Tania Krämer. Thanks so much for the latest.